Watch this.
Yes, no, yes at all. He can't do anything to us. But there's a gun around the corner. Yeah, and then we can work on.
Watch it again. Watch it again. Watch. Pay attention to what happens when the sound cuts out.
Yes, no, yes at all. He can't do anything to us. But there's a gun around the corner. Yeah, and then we can work on.
Aha, so what the heck is going on there, right? It's actually a very, it's something that affects a lot of different games, but especially Tarkov. I notice it a lot. And for people who kind of find themselves getting confused sometimes with the soundscape or what the hell's going on, I think this is a big reason why. It's because if you imagine, I'll just use, let's see, I'll use my coffee mug. I'll use my coffee mug as a lamppost, right? It's about occlusion. So you picture a straight line from me to you, right? As long as this connection is there, you'll hear me, right? But if a lamppost comes by, boop, and blocks us, right? You'll no longer hear my voice. But even more drastic is it will actually cut it out. It'll just go boop, and you didn't hear me for all the time I was talking, right? So that's what's going on. They call that, it's called the lamppost problem. Now, let's go through possible solutions around this. Very complicated, deceptively complicated issue. Here we go. Check this out.
There are a lot more. One is obstruction, which is to say sound waves bend around stuff. Then the second one is portling, sounds redirected by the environment around you. The third effect is occlusion, which is just including the initial sound and the reverberant sound. The fourth effect is reverberance. The fifth effect is decay time, which is simply that a bigger room reverberates for longer.
We started talking about how
So it's pretty sweet, huh? Now, what is that? That is Microsoft Research thing called Project Acoustics. Okay, let me pause it real quick and kind of explain what this is. This is something called HoloLens, right? So picture it's Microsoft's version of VR, okay, where what it allows is forget what it's called. It's like mixed reality. It's called mixed reality. So this person is using Project Acoustics within a mixed reality environment. Listen to how this comes across.
Vault the geometry and the materials for each surface of the world. This produces a simulation which includes parameters. In the real world, humans use audiovisual cues to understand the world around them. Acoustics provide critical perceptual cues about the surrounding environment. In virtual worlds, combining spatial audio with acoustics increases user immersion, similar to how detailed wall textures with realistic object lighting do so on the visual side. The approach to acoustics described here is a tool that analyzes virtual worlds.
And here it is. Let me pause it right here. This is it with it off first, right? I want you to relate to this, right? See what's happening. As he steps away, notice how the sound does not change like we think. Here it is, it on? Now that's pretty stinking cool. And there's a longer one out there. I'm not going to show it. I'll try to find it again, throw it in the description. There's a longer one out there where I think it's that same guy in the same office, and he's actually walking from there into all these different, like down a hallway, and it just sounds phenomenal, right? So here we go. If you're done with that, you're done. Okay. Tarkov versus the Lamppost, or just call it Unity Sound Engine versus the Lamppost. Lamppost wins. Okay. Even with Steam Audio, okay? That's the thing. So that's the intro part. Now, if you know me, we're going to go deep in this. Let's go a little bit deeper. This is brought about because of a conversation I had just a while ago on Reddit. Good old Reddit, okay? This is someone just kind of complaining. He just had some valid complaints, right, and criticisms about sound and EFT. I'm not going to read this verbatim, but I'm going to try to use this as a reference to talk through it. And it's things that we know, right? One of the things I'm trying to raise awareness about here is that when people get confused, or things in Tarkov don't seem to make sense, right? Whether I didn't hear the guy coming up behind me, or I didn't hear him going up the middle staircase, or I didn't hear him, okay? These are all these kind of like, kind of Band-Aid issues, or kind of Band-Aid fixes to like long-standing issues within the game, okay? And I know, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus here, I know BSG is really trying hard to fix it. and they want to fix it. And same thing with the Steam Audio folks. They're trying to have a solution that really works well. Okay, actually, I'm not going to read from it. I'll just throw it. Maybe it's easier to watch it this way. So here we go. So here's one of the problems, and this is just from a layman, right, outside looking in. I've done some kind of offhand research in my free time for the past year or so, kind of just building up an understanding of some of this stuff from the outside. And what we have is like Steam Audio can do some really, really cool stuff. And there's a demo I posted a long time ago that kind of kicked all this hype up for Steam Audio coming to EFT. And it was one of the ones that really helped drive it forward because it was phenomenal. Okay, and I'll even throw a link to that video, or I might even overlay it here so you can hear it real quick. But it was phenomenal. Okay, but it was kind of a hand-picked scene, right? It was a small environment, a small scene, and all those fancy tricks that Steam Audio was doing to pull that off. Okay, it was a very very highly cultivated scene. Okay, so what happens is in the real world, you start applying Steam Audio, some of its more advanced modules and features to get all these really cool effects, the echoes, the reverb, the delays, the way the sounds bounce and echo, and transform and bend and everything. It can do some of those things, not as well as Project Acoustics from the people I've talked to. It can do those things, but here's the catch: at a price. It is super resource intensive. Like I've heard people, I don't have the links here, but I've just offline conversations, people have told me like it'll eat anywhere from easily eat 8 gigs of RAM just to compute the soundscape, okay? Which for obvious reasons is a no-go. That's a non-starter, okay? And that they're trying their hardest to get these down to more manageable resource usage so they can start being used, but that could be a really long road, okay? Now, so what we have currently in EFT is Steam Audio. They're using just their binaural audio component, from what I understand, whereas all the fancier stuff, as far as I'm aware, has not been pulled in yet for obvious reasons, right? And again, I'm not blaming BSG. I would not pull these in either, right? So what's interesting though is there's another kind of option out there, and something I've been talking about for a while, writing about, is something called Project Acoustics. And it's the kicker here is that it is very performant. It is even more advanced than Steam Audio. It could do a lot better things, and it's even more accurate, right? But how? Okay, here's where it gets interesting. So you have Steam Audio doing all this stuff in real time, whereas Project Acoustic says, let's kind of flip the script. If you guys are old enough, or were gaming long ago enough, there's a time, I think it was like maybe Half-Life 1 ish era, where we started seeing shadows being baked into the environment. Like you remember, like old school Doom or Quake, the shadows were very much either on or off for whole entire areas. Where finally we started seeing things where you could have lights coming through a window, and the window actually casting appropriate shadows on the surrounding environment, right? But as that was kind of, they call it baked in, right? Those things were kind of, the shadows were pre-computed when the map was compiled, and it's shown to the player, and it can't be affected. It's like it's painted on, more or less, right? But what that did do is you could create some very interesting and complex scenes with complex shadows and stuff, and none of it's computed in real time, right? Which lets the speed come into play. Then you have like the advent Half-Life 2-ish era of games started introducing dynamic shadows with flashlights, that kind of stuff, with players casting shadows dynamically. That's a whole new era started coming in, right? But back to the topic of Project Acoustics, what it does is it kind of does just like they did with shadows. As it goes through, and you can calibrate this, it's a free Unity plugin. It can be used in projects free from what I've read in licensing agreements and stuff. And the catch though is what it does is it looks at the scene, the map world, and it goes through like literally a voxel scan of the literal geometry of the environment. And the map designer sets up whatever materials they want to use, all kind of some certain little parameters for what materials are in the scene, right? And then Project Acoustics goes through and crunches everything. It goes through the whole thing. And if you, like a visual of this would be, remember as a kid playing the ball pits, right? Tons of those plastic balls everywhere. Well, imagine those more spaced out, evenly spaced out, right? But filling up like a swimming pool, like an underwater swimming pool, just surrounded by surrounded by the jump balls, right? Well, picture that. Those are probes, okay? And what Project Acoustics does is you can calibrate this however you want, how much detail or less detail you want. And it goes through, and there's a radius around the player. And you can say, hey, I want you to compute, let's say, a 40-meter radius, 50-meter radius, whatever, around the player. And it literally steps through every single possible location that the player can be in, and it computes. If a sound comes from down the hall over here, connect the two dots. From over here to here, what would it sound like? Now do it again. He scoots over, and from here, here, here. Just picture in 3D space. Again, this whole pool of play balls, right? And every one is calculating what the sound, what type of effects would be added to the sound. Reverb effects, delay effects, portaling, keyholing effects, blah, 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 on and on and on, right? It does that for the whole entire scene. And then it takes that data, right? It makes something that the map can reference, right? That the game can reference in real time. So, again, instead of calculating this stuff dynamically, on the fly, it's already done the legwork in advance. And then as the player is stepping through these same regions of the map, it's referencing that huge file, and it can make, some insanely good representations, right? And I might switch back to this just for a sec. Let's see. So the downside of this, of course, is when, is that upfront computation. That's the downside, okay? Because it is so intensive. There's just no way around it. Right now, it's a very intensive process. Now you could do, and I've experimented with this, there's a little demo, again, I'll put links down there. There's a demo you can throw up into Unity, and it literally is, you drop it in, you put your dude in there, and boom, you can experience it. You can mess around with it, change parameters and stuff, and it sounds stinking cool. But if you want to, the downside is scanning all this geometry takes time. It takes a lot of computation, depending on how complex the scene is, okay? And I've heard of things taking, depending on the scene, what you're trying to do. I've heard of people saying it could take, days, sometimes a week or more, right? Just picture that, a machine sitting in a corner, nothing but 24/7 churning away to compute this data set, right? Which is where Microsoft comes into play. That's where they make their money off of it, I guess. Is they have their huge Azure supercomputer, giant space age supercomputers, right? And what they're saying is, hey, give that stuff to us. We will crunch through it for you at a breathtaking speed, right? And give it back to you for a price, right? Now, I don't know. I'm not in that space. I don't know how competitive their prices are. But the question there is obviously, well, is it worth it? Okay, compared to what? Compared to a dev sitting there and manually slogging through Steam Audio, to get set up the zone, set up the deals, to troubleshoot it, to deal with all the headaches that come along with kind of massaging out some of the weird quirks that it has, from what people have told me, right? And also on the is it worth it question is, as great as it sounds, okay, Project Acoustics is not yet a one and done solution. Now it could be, okay, but it all comes back down to that computation time thing I was talking about. So there's an exponential difference between kind of placing a character through this level in like a 50-meter radius around the character versus the same thing. Place that character, do all those with like a 200 or 300 or 400 meter radius around the character. Once you start, the more geometry and literal, volume you start pulling in to the computational space, that's where it just increases exponentially, right? So, so think about that. You go and you do this, you cross your fingers, let's hope it turns out right. You make a mistake, or there's a problem, or you need to fix something with the level, or you want to change the material, or you want to adjust how something's done. Okay, well, so, you make those adjustments and you fire it up again and wait another, however long it takes, right? So, to get around this, it's kind of interesting. I've heard, just talking offline with some devs, they've said to get around this, they use a layered solution. So, what they'll do is they'll make a radius of Project Acoustics that is somewhat conforming to whatever the complex level geometry is, right? You don't need to go 500 meters around if we're computing small rooms, or like the dorms area. Well, dorms is not 500, it doesn't expand 500 meters around the player, right? So what they'll do is they'll kind of calibrate it. In certain areas, we'll use a high resolution, right? And then for the more open space areas, picture like the concrete, concrete parking lot of like interchange or something. You obviously don't need this huge, up to the a fly's hair precision when you just have concrete for miles, right, with cars interspersed in between in there. You don't need that to be that exact, right? So what they'll do is they'll kind of pair it. They'll use Steam Audio as like a near-term high-resolution deal, and for the distance stuff, that's what they'll pull on like Fmod, or I think it's called WIs or something like that, right? To do calculations for distance effects, and they'll kind of blend those together. And I've seen some results of that are very, 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 very convincing and very, very good, right? Another way I've seen them do it is they'll kind of slice things up. So instead of saying, okay, Project Acoustics, here's the giant map of shoreline, right? Have fun. It's like, holy cow, that's huge, right? So what they'll do is they'll break up into sections. They'll say, whatever, just make up whatever you want to do. Here's the gas station area, here's the church area, here's some area of the resort, the different wings of resort, each kind of chunked up, right? And they'll do those in batches, right? So individual sets, again, just to iterate through quicker and have it churn through quicker, and they can make their tweaks and stuff. And then I think there's a way, don't quote me on this, but I think there's a way to kind of take those disparate pieces and then stitch them together. Okay, now here's Project Acoustics, stitch all those different pieces of quilt together, right, to make it. And then maybe there's some cleanup you have to do along the edges, at the seams of those connections to make it transfer and blend properly, right? And let's see, I think I had another one. And I guess the other one some people said is they'll use that approach just to fine-tune things, and then once they get it how they like it, then they'll say, okay, now we'll spend, whatever, I'm just making up, now we'll spend 2 days on an Azure server, or render a server farm to crank this out, type thing. Let me just read a little bit more. So that's kind of the cost side of it that you have to think of, because there's a cost involved. But again, so it comes back to also, is the price worth it? But it's also, at the end of the day, do players even care? Okay, and I know this is where I tend to be kind of an audiophile, and man, I'm not doing this an ego trip. I do. For me, it's one of those 1,000% yes type things. Okay, because at least in my mind, the people I talk to when I talk to them about this kind of stuff, they'll say that the way sound is sound as an experience is so much more immediate and visceral than eyesight. Okay, it's if you want to example this, watch a horror movie with the sound off, right? Or watch a horror movie with some goofy Teletubbies music in the background or something, right? It's just, there's such a huge disconnect. It's like, this isn't scary anymore, right? Whereas if you do the opposite, you shut your eyes, right, and you hone in on a very high fidelity sound experience, it can, it arrests you. You feel it in your core, right? Because, not to get too technical about this, but I think a lot of it has to do with the way our brains process sound. I've talked about this in other videos and won't rehash it here, but sight is very, very, very computationally intensive. It takes a while for us to make sense of a scene, right? Whereas a sound, boof, you hear a clap of thunder, right away you jump, right? There's no delay, like, what is that? Is that, oh, that's Tequila rushing at me, right? It's the sound that, boom, shakes you to your core immediately, okay? So, there was a time, way back when, in the olden days, right? Companies like, I think it was I don't even know how to say it, Ariel 3D, I think is how you say it, if I'm remembering right. And even early days creative, where they were exploring these spaces. How do we get real cool 3D stuff? And then it kind of fell by the wayside. For all the good of it, I think creative bought a bunch of these guys out, these smaller studios out, and then they just pretty much let it fizzle, okay? And the silver lining is that with the advent of VR, that's kind of what, from my understanding of it, that's kind of what made Steam Audio kind of come back into the picture. Is there's Valve producing Half-Life Alyx, and they said, hey, you know what? When we do these tests of VR, when the sound is that disconnected, like go back to that Office video, right? When it's that unrealistic, it really breaks the immersion. So we got to find a way to get it. I think they pulled in some Steam Audio stuff here and there to help explore that space more. So that's maybe some silver lining. And hopefully this stuff is going to come back into the fore. and into the forefront of people's realization. So, I mean, I'm not doing this to bash BSG at all. I love what they're doing with the game. Their sound design, I love their sound design. It is amazing. From like the raw sound files, I think it's very, very high quality. Now, yes, you could put on some cans and really dial it in and see some level, you know, some distortion here and there, but I don't want to get that fine grained. I'm just saying, as a raw experience, whoo, they knocked it out of the park, right? And to me, that next level of immersion, like literally, we can talk about reflections in the deal and shadows in the grass. Okay, that gets us so far. I'm saying, man, wouldn't it be awesome if BSG could have some room, some overhead, some performance overhead, again, to make a very realistic audio thing. I mean, picture it, especially with VoIP coming on, right? That's one of my main worries right now with Streets of Tarkov, and you see this with the cool, some of the slices of life that, you know, the certain scenes they put in with Awesome Map Lighthouse, right? If you walk through those buildings with with teams or other players around you, up above you, outside, but it's an audio cluster, right? For you know, you hear people, they're right next to me. No, they're not. That's the next door up. Oh my God, I hear somebody opening a backpack. No, that's the guy across the street, you know, three houses down, right? I mean, exaggerating, but I hope you get the idea there. Whereas I'm thinking, and again, I'm not the dev, so don't take this. I'm not trying to toot my own horn or something or put myself in their shoes. I'm just saying, from a player's perspective, I just always think, holy cow, if they can nail the sound side of it, with echoes, with realistic reverb, with changes in the scenes and how things avoid the lamppost effect, or the opposite, I didn't show it, is the keyhole effect. And you see this in games too. So the keyhole effect is you picture a narrow cut, right? So you have wall and a wall, and this narrow little sliver, a keyhole, right? You're peering through something where you're on this, you're blocked off, you don't hear it. And then once you come in that little bitty sliver, oh, you hear it, right? And then you don't hear it again. How that's a super harsh transition, okay? So I'm just thinking, man, to get that stuff right would be really, really cool. So anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I'll throw some links. And thanks for watching. You guys and gals, take care. Hope you're safe and healthy. Adios.